So I just want to welcome everyone today to our Permission to Pause, a self-care presentation by Michelle Darrell. And we're so blessed to have her as part of our MFS US staff. But besides being one of our staff members, she actually brings a whole lot of other cool tools to the table of her life. And I won't get into all of it because I'm sure she's going to introduce herself and some of the different things that she works on. But we are really pleased to have you all with us today in the middle of this crazy time of life. It's really awesome that we can all come together like this and take a few minutes to give ourselves that permission to pause. And Michelle's going to actually take us through how to actually do that with purpose. So Michelle, thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you so much. So I do have my video camera on for now, just so that you can see who I am if you don't know me already. If at any time my internet decides to lag as it was doing earlier, I will turn that off and you'll just hear my disembodied voice, but that's okay too. So welcome everybody. As Joanna mentioned, my name is Michelle Darrell. I am fortunate enough to be part of the MFS US team, and aside from that, I am a mom, I'm a military spouse, and I needed a creative outlet a few years ago to sort of hone some of my anxieties and excitements and a lot of different things. I'm a creative person, so I like having a creative outlet. And one of the things that I learned as I moved to California was that I have a love of blogging. And recently I've sort of let it slide. Life got busy and things were crazy. So I had let it slide, and now that I'm home and trying to balance all of that stuff, I've sort of picked it back up again. That much to say, though, that we all have our need for an outlet. And I wanted to say before we start anything else today, you've already given yourself permission to pause by joining us here today. So you're doing well by attending and taking this time for yourself. I think it's important also to know that this is a discussion. The things that I'm going to share with you today are rooted in my own self-experience, personal experience, I should say, as well as some research that I've done over the past few years and recently, because I am finding it difficult to find time for self-care in this new reality that we're in currently. So I felt like, hey, why not? Why wouldn't we share this as a group? The thing that you should know about me before we start is that my strongest value that I lead with is authenticity. So when I share an anecdote or when I share an experience or a moment of self-expression, I'll point that out because I feel like everybody is on their own journey to self-care, and it's going to look different for everybody. These are just some tools and ideologies to help guide us along the way. I will try to keep an eye on the chat as we go, but I know Joanna's got that for me too, but I like to keep an eye on things. Welcome everybody from literally across the continent. Love it. So we're going to move to our next slide, which is simply just a breakdown of how this is going to go today. We have about an hour. And I'm wordy and I'm chatty, so I'm going to really try to stick to the topics that I want to present and share with you. Throughout those conversations, I may ask for a green check or red X, or to ask you to answer something in the chat. Feel free to do so if you feel comfortable. Part of self-care is also knowing your boundaries. If sharing with a group is not part of your personal comfort, that's okay. Nobody is going to judge you based on that. The session is recorded as well, but that does not include the chat panel or the participant panel. So you can feel free to share in there as well, and I will leave those things as more anonymous. We're going to talk today about self-care and uncertainty, which seems really fitting right now. We're also going to talk about why self-care might feel selfish at a time like this. We're going to learn about giving ourselves permission to pause. And we're also going to talk about the ideology, the tools, and the practice of self-care. One of the things that's important to me when it comes to self-care is knowing that you're not alone in this journey. Sorry, my other phone was ringing. I had to throw it across to the other table. Yeah, so when you're taking care of yourself, it's important to know that it's an individualistic journey. So as you think about this stuff today and as you hear some concepts, maybe take notes, little mental notes or little jot notes about how you can incorporate some of this into your day-to-day life, right? Right. the first topic we're going to talk about is self-care and uncertainty. And in uncertain times, it is invaluable to know and have a certainty of who we are and to know our worth. And what I mean by that is that if we know who we are and what we are grounded in uncertain times, and we know the value of what's important to us and how important we are to the world, then it will help keep us grounded when things feel out of control. Being grounded in a time like this can be very difficult because we feel uprooted. Even though we might still be living in the same home with the same people in a similar or comfortable space, it's uprooted our headspace and it's uprooted our usual. So that's where the uncertainty comes from. But if you are certain in the who I am and what I'm worth, it's easier to move forward in a journey of self-care at a time like this, because really self-care and knowing that a self-care journey is important is really about knowing your own worth. When facing the unknown and feeling as though all control has been lost, self-care is more important than ever. There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind that these are scary times for so many of us. They become easy to maneuver, though, when we clean our minds as often as we clean our hands. And I know that sounds crazy because we're cleaning our hands a whole lot right now. But cleansing our thoughts is really important also. And it's important to cleanse our thoughts of not only negative self-talk or unworthiness, although those are high on the list of importance. It's also important to cleanse our thoughts from too much social media intake, too much news intake, too many fear-mongering moments in our day can set us off. So think about that as you're washing your hands repeatedly and singing happy birthday twice. Maybe you want to also take that moment as a moment of mindfulness. What's holding on in my brain that's maybe not serving me well right now? What is in my mind and in my heart that's not doing me justice at this moment? And so, you'll probably end up washing your hands for longer than 20 seconds, and you're taking that moment to cleanse your mind as well. Also, during a time like this, we're hearing a lot of buzzwords. We're hearing social distancing, physical distancing. We're hearing quarantine, self-isolation, and some of that can be really daunting. But social distancing and all of those things are a physical recommendation, and they're not about your emotions. So right now, it's important to remain emotionally close to yourself, to those you love, and to remain emotionally healthy. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, it was actually ironically my husband, I kept saying physical distancing because that was the initial buzz phrase that came out around keeping the 6-foot distance. And there's great importance in that. And then, my husband was quick to remind me that it's sort of adjusted to this sort of reminding yourself that it's physical distancing, not social distancing. Social distancing means don't gather in big groups, and that's what it means physically. But we need to be socially aware of our connectivity to others and to ourselves at this time. Is that clear? I kind of walked around that in a lot of words, but I really want to want you to understand what I mean by the difference of balancing that physical distance from folks to finding ways to emotionally take care of yourself. And one of those things might be staying socially connected while physically distant. We have to reach out to others, but we also have to reach inward. We have to reach inward to find those moments to take time for ourselves, and that's what becomes difficult. So one of the big suggestions in a lot of the research that I've been looking through recently in articles that are coming from different medical research teams on the mental health piece of all of this, the impact of COVID-19, has been, it's really a time to try something new. Now, we're limited on what we can do that's new right now. I'd love to take up stand-up paddleboarding, but that's not an option right now because everything is closed. So that can't be the something new I try. But maybe it's just a little something creative. Your kids are coloring. Maybe you print off a coloring sheet and color with them. Maybe that's not something you're typically engaging in, not because you don't like to color with your kids, but because, they color while you're making breakfast, let's say. So maybe it's coloring or something else creative. Maybe you play an instrument that you haven't picked up in a while. Maybe it's journaling. I have a friend who told me this morning that she has been listening to a podcast that's motivational and journaling every night before bed during this time. It's a new habit for her, and you could see in her face how good she felt about doing that. It's a time that maybe meditation, if that's something that's called to you previously, but you haven't taken that dive, maybe it's a time for some meditation. Maybe it's relearning how to meditate if you've done that in the past. Maybe it comes down to removing some of the negativity from your world. I know myself, I try to keep my social media very light, especially my personal social media. I use it for sharing photos of my kids with my family who are far away. I use it for sharing funny memes, sharing great information that's important but positive. And as of late, I've noticed that many of folks who are my acquaintances, who might be my friends on my social media, are really negative, and that had impacted me greatly. So I've actually done a little bit of a tidy in the social media department in my life, because I cannot physically or emotionally handle that impact that was having on me. It was draining me because we're spending more time paying attention to stuff like that right now, potentially. It was very draining for me, and I found myself wanting to retaliate and being one of those keyboard warriors, you know, how dare you talk like that? I didn't, because I'm a both professional and kind person, but I have made some statements on my social media to say, if you have something negative to share, please don't share it with me. I want to see the joy in your homes. I want to see the smiles on your faces, and if you don't have that, reach out to find it. So that's another thing that we can do to try something new. It just allows us a new lease on our approach to the day. And maybe you don't delete them entirely. Maybe you unfollow or mute or take a break. I think that's an option now on some social media platforms. And really, it's just about finding new habits and new things to do in our day that create space for ourselves. You might be surprised to find that some of these things will become habits that are healthy habits in your world that translate far past all of this. And I'm just looking through the chat right now. Negativity is exhausting, and it's a lot. But we can control that intake, and we can find a place of peace with it. Maybe we need a little bit of that push and pull in our lives. We know we all need a little yin and yang, but know where your boundaries are. Boundary setting is crucial for self-care. That is like my #1 tip. If you don't set boundaries for yourself, how can you get to a place of taking care of who you are and what you need? Without those boundaries, you're not defining your wants, needs, must-haves, time for yourself, balance. You're not defining anything without boundaries. So really, you know, if you take nothing else away from today, really think about your personal values and boundaries. I think that also it's really important to know, if you haven't thought of this in this way, that boredom is a common trigger for so many things. And right now, a lot of folks are saying, how can I possibly be bored? I'm working from home, I'm homeschooling my kids, my husband is working from home, or my spouse is working from home, our schedule is everywhere, my house is a mess. Or they're saying, I've had all this extra time to do all this extra stuff, and they've taken on projects. But what I am hearing under, hello? Sorry. What I am hearing under all of that at some level, though, is there is a bit of boredom or stagnation. And maybe it doesn't look like you have nothing to do, but maybe it feels like everything is paused. And so what I want you to think about is, when you are bored, what does that trigger you to feel? How does it trigger you to act? And is that a trigger that you need to be aware of? Because not saying that you have to fill your days in every nook and cranny with self-care and in between all of your other activities so that you don't get bored. But what I do want you to think about is how stagnation or boredom triggers you in your life. So feel free to share those in the chat if you want, or I'm going to share one of mine with you. When I'm bored, I eat, mindlessly eat. So I will wander over to the pantry, I'll grab a little snack, I'll wander over to the fridge, I'll grab a little snack, and it's not necessarily the most terrible thing, but it can be very uncomfortable, because See, yeah, a few bored eaters there. I appreciate the camaraderie in there. But I share that with you because for me, taking care of my physical body is as important to my mental health as anything else. So when I get triggered and I start to eat when I'm bored, I then also feel uncomfortable in my own skin, and then I feel disappointed that I'm not meeting my staying in my healthy goals that I'm trying to achieve, and it's a spiral for me. So I wanted to share that with you all because we all have triggers, and boredom is one that's kind of universal. Maybe it's watching too much TV, maybe it's going to bed and being lethargic. It's different for everybody, and I want you just to think about that on your own, but I really want you to think about how boredom can be a trigger, okay? The way to kind of combat that trigger, I just realized I'm using really weird hand movement there. Combating that trigger is about creating or sticking to a routine. So give me a green check if you have been sticking to some sort of, or have created a new routine during all of this. If you haven't, that's okay. Don't be worried. You're not the only ones. All right, I'm seeing it kind of all over the place. So some yeses, new routines, some no's. And so what I would say to you is if you're finding some days get a little out of whack, they start to feel like a boulder rolling downhill and you can't catch up, really think about what little things you could integrate into your family and work routine or your self-care routine or your rest routine that could help structure a little more of your day. Again, it's kind of nice to get up in the morning, wear my pajamas to get my first cup of coffee while I check my work emails, don't get me wrong. But part of the thing that I had to do was set my alarm in the morning. I have two girls who are good sleepers when they try, but mostly they're pretty good 12-hour sleepers. So if they're not going to bed till 8 or 8:30 now, instead of their 7 or 7:30, which is when we were going to physical school, they're not waking up till 8 or 8:30 in the morning. And it's real easy for me to sleep in till 8 or 8:30 in the morning. But that's not conducive to the type of day that I want to have. So for me, the first step I had to take in creating a schedule was setting my alarm. That does two things for me. It makes me go to bed a little earlier at night. I need my rest. We all need our rest. Self-care is about rest too. I also need structure to stay focused. So that allows me to get up a little earlier than everybody else in the house, have that first cup of coffee, check those emails, do my gratitude journal, because I do that every day faithfully, and set my intentions for my day. So those are just some hints on how routine can help us feel more certain and grounded in uncertain times, and that will help us develop mind cleanliness and self-care habits. If y'all want to share in the chat any of the things that you're doing, those of you who are feeling a little bit more like they have a better routine happening now that maybe at the beginning of all this, things that you've put in place, feel free to share those in the chat. At this point, does anybody have any questions or anything that they wanted to share? You can also raise your hand, and I'll just scroll through briefly to see if I have any hands raised. And if not, that's okay too. Awesome. Just checking out the chat. Excellent. I think these are some great things in here in the chat about what you're working on in terms of your structure. So I love making the bed first thing in the morning. I am with you on that one. We normally make our bed every day. Today, it's not made simply because I'm washing the sheets, but it feels good. It feels like I've accomplished something and can check that off the box first thing in the morning. I love somebody said, get in some exercise every day, move your body. Maybe it's start with a healthy breakfast. Maybe it's go for that morning walk, or maybe it's just finding time for connectivity. Oh, I love that. Connecting at the end of the workday, whether it's outside or, in your own space, having a space to do that is so important for connectivity within the people in your household. These are great ideas. Keep them coming. I'm going to write these down after. All right, so moving on to the next slide, let's talk about self-care. at a time like this, when we sometimes get into that mindset, as we should, about thinking about how impactful this is for so many people, healthcare workers, grocery store workers, truck drivers, mechanics. The laundry list of essential services right now is high. And so sometimes it can feel like taking time for ourselves and taking care of ourselves can feel selfish. But that is the furthest thing from the truth, and I bet you that those healthcare workers and essential service workers would tell you, please take care of yourselves, because you can't take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself. I love this quote. It is like one of the fundamental, if you ask me, like, you know, if I had 5 foundational quotes of my life, this would be one of them. So self-care is taking care of your physical, emotional, social, mental, cognitive, and spiritual parts of yourself. Self-care is neither optional nor selfish. It is necessary. I just want you to look at that for a minute on the screen. I want you to really breathe that in. Really breathe that in. It is so important to understand how necessary and non-indulgent self-care really is. Sometimes we think about self-care and we go to a place of pampering. Not that that's not self-care. Bonbons and bubble baths can be self-care. Don't get me wrong. If you're doing that because you need to take time away from your regular space, recharge, have some meditative moments, clear your mind, then that's part of the self-care. But the care in that really comes from taking the time to cleanse your thoughts, right, that we talked about. It's nurturing yourself through activities that replenish your energy and help manage your stress. So that can be look very different than pampering. Self-care has been a trendy buzzword over the past few years, and people have gone straight to the, you know, that means going to the spa for, you know, $500 for the spa treatments. Well, can't do that right now. But, you know, we've gone to a place where we think it's very indulgent, and really it's not. It's really about managing stress and replenishing energies. I want you to think about, as I talk through the next little bit, about how you can manage that and some of those actual physical and thoughtful things you are going to do at the end of this to start practicing self-care. So it's definitely about quality over quantity, and I'm just reading the chat as well. So it is more of simple actions of self-care rather than extravagant, luxurious moments, if that's making sense to you. So what I want to say about that is, as you're thinking about this, and I want you to think about your day. Start to finish, the day can look busy, okay, but break it down. What kinds of little things can you be doing, little things, little moments throughout the day to be more mindful and taking care and replenishing energy? So how can we manage that in this new time, okay? I really feel like, you know, we're going to be relating our lives in the near future to pre-COVID, post-COVID kind of talk, but right now we're in it. So how are we going to manage that? We're going to set some boundaries for ourselves. That doesn't mean, you know, having a brick wall in front of your bedroom door so your kids can't get in, although it's tempting, my friends. I feel you. It's about setting personal boundaries that give you allotted space, okay? So maybe it's okay, I'm going to give you a personal example because I'm moving around my words and my thoughts too quickly. So for me, having a boundary, one of my boundaries that I set at my house is that if you are awake, whether you're my husband or my children, if you are awake and it is prior to 7 a.m. any day of the week, then you are to do what you need to do when you get up, you know, wash your face, use the washroom, do whatever, and then find something quiet to do, because that's my time to do either my early morning workout, my gratitude journal, have a cup of coffee in the quiet, whatever that is. That's a boundary for me, okay? It's really important to have that boundary. So, and with that boundary comes practice. I have to be implementing that boundary all the time. Not screaming at anybody to get away from me, although I'm sure I have, but really just practicing, and then it becomes a learned behavior for everybody. Oh yeah, it's before 7. Mom's not ready to see us yet. We'll get to her in a minute. You know, and it also might be setting boundaries with work. Working from home and balancing home life is really challenging. I've literally had to get to this point now where I write in my agenda the exact timings that I'm going to try to work in. So I'm going to check in from this time to this time, and then I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to do this from this time to this time, getting in all the things I need to do, paying attention and doing my job well. But it actually, by setting those times and my expectations in those times to balance my work life at home, I'm creating boundaries for my workplace and for myself, because my workplace is phenomenal. We're very supportive, but I also love what I do, so I could get carried away and get in there and work way longer than I need to on certain things in certain moments. So I'm really, you know, just trying to work to make sure I'm replenishing, so I'm doing quality work when I give it back. There's a variety of ways that you can implement boundaries, but I want you to think about for just a moment what some of your boundaries might be. We've also talked about schedule. If you like to use your iCalendar or an app to schedule, that's important. And I think for me, that schedule directly correlates to my boundaries. I'm just reading in the chat, yes, it's setting those timings is so important, and it's hard to follow because we're our own worst enemies sometimes for setting expectations and not, you know, and working around them and making it gray area. So really sticking to that. So I think when you set boundaries and you have a schedule, those kind of mirror each other and come together. So that's like layering this beautiful cake of self-care. Ooh, that's a nice metaphor. I write things into a physical calendar. I'm with you in the chat. I like being able to check things off. I like to-do lists. I like washing my hands of it at the end of the day and knowing exactly what I've done. I feel good about that. I feel rewarded. It's also important then in that schedule and in those boundaries to find times for connectivity. I was reading some of you making sure to connect with your spouse at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day to have a real moment of connectivity. I'm trying to work in time, and that's nurturing. That's self-care. You don't have to be alone for self-care. I don't think I've mentioned that. We've talked about boundaries and sort of taking time for yourself, but taking time to replenish in connected moments is also important. I'm working really hard right now to work on 20 minutes a day, individual with my children, to be with them at their level and engaging with them. That doesn't sound like a whole lot. We do more than that as a family, but that one-on-one engagement replenishes our relationships. That can be with your children. It can be via Zoom with your parent who's living at a distance. It can be with your best friend who you haven't seen in 2 years because you live far away, but you're still connecting. Those are replenishing moments. You don't have to be alone for self-care. The other thing is sleep. Feel free to raise your hand or give me a green check or type in the chat, but this particular time in life has caused me to lose more sleep than I have ever imagined in my life. I have vivid dreams. I'm having restlessness. I am having not difficulty falling asleep, but difficulty staying asleep. And so I was reading it about that. And in times of uncertainty, we definitely can be challenged with our sleep habits. And sleep is so important for a physical replenishment as well as emotional and mental replenishment. I can tell you that I have been working out hard. I've been spending time outdoors. There should be no reason for me not to be able to find time to sleep. Oh, I'm not sure who that was. I'm just going to ask you to remember to mute your microphone, please, and thank you. That would be awesome. But yeah, so finding time, making sure you're getting in enough sleep. So that's going to mirror with some of that scheduling your day so you move your body, so you find time to rest, and all of that good stuff. Sleep is so important to self-care. We can't start the day half empty and help anybody, let alone ourselves. And then all of these things will come together and you'll really be creating healthy habits that not only will be about self-care, but just having, living your best life. It's really about that whole ideology of how do we take these tools and make them habitual and make them positive forces in our life. And I think that self-care is really the root of having a healthy, fulfilled, positive lifestyle. As little as 15 minutes a day of self-care is restorative. And I'm not talking 15 minutes all at once. I'm talking 15 minutes spread out of the course of your 24 hours. That can be restorative. A few moments of mindfulness while you wash the dishes, a few moments of quiet meditation, a few moments of connected, engaged, positive conversation, yoga, a run. It can be as intense or as relaxed as you want it to be, as long as you're finding it replenishing and giving you energy. Sleep hygiene is definitely essential. I was just reading in the chat. It's so essential and so crucial. And at a time like this when everything feels busy in our minds, resting is so important. But 15 minutes a day of self-care, if you really think about it, over 24 hours, so let's say you take away 8 for sleeping, if you're being real positive on that these days, it's not too bad. You can do that. Anybody can do that. It might take some work to get there. Maybe it starts with 2 or 3 minutes a day and you build up, kind of like training to run a marathon. You don't just head out and run 26.2 miles. Dear Lord, you would hurt yourself. And maybe it wouldn't fit into your day, and maybe it would seem completely unreachable. Start somewhere. Start small, but start somewhere. If everybody can just take a moment, I'd like you to ask yourself a very simple question. When did you last do something for yourself that was just for you? You don't have to answer aloud. You don't have to type in the chat, but I really want you to reflect, because I think reflecting on our self-care is a moment of learning. I might think I'm taking in lots of time for self-care, but if I really sit back and reflect, maybe it's not been as much as I thought. Maybe I haven't been clear with my boundaries. Maybe I haven't been focused on replenishing myself. Maybe that's why my anxiety is high. Maybe that's why I'm grumpy with my kids and my husband. Maybe that's why I don't want to pick up the phone to call anybody. I don't feel up to it. When we don't feel up to doing things that we're normally doing, maybe we need to be reflective and seeing how much we are emptied. We talk about you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So maybe we're feeling empty, and that's why we're distancing from those things that make us feel happy or feel fulfilled. So I want to make sure you're thinking about it really clearly and finding time for reflection in this moment. When did you last do something that was just for you? Okay. So as you're thinking about that, I think it can be hard. We can find it difficult to give ourselves permission to create this habit of self-care because it feels like it's going to take some work, right? I think what it all starts with, though, is creating a mindset of worth, and I mentioned that up front. Knowing that you're worthy of the time to take care of yourself is really where this all starts. And there's a strong belief that permission or allowing ourselves the opportunity to engage in something is really about knowing our worth and knowing how to place importance on the things we value. I think that if we're taking the time to invest in a session like this today, or you're taking the time to even remotely think about self-care, you know that you're worth it. Maybe you need that reminder from time to time. We all do. I know I do. We harbor things like mom guilt. We feel like we should be working harder at our jobs, or we feel like we're not doing enough. And guilt is something that a lot of us wear for whatever reason. And what I would say is that if you can find a way to shift those guilty moments and say to yourself, I'm doing this so that I have more time to give and more of me to give, the people around you will know that you're doing that for them. And I think that's important to note because you're doing it for yourself, but you can also not give to others if you don't give to yourself. So you're worth that time, you're worth those moments, and you're worth that habit. I apologize for the phone ringing in the background if you can hear that. I can't reach it. So what I would ask is that you take time to find a mantra for yourself that really is about worth. It can be 3 simple words. You can write it on your mirror in your bathroom. You can have it on a note in your purse. I have not used my purse in weeks because I haven't gone anywhere. So maybe the purse is in a good spot right now. Maybe it's on your laptop. Maybe it's on the kitchen fridge. Because everybody needs to hear this, and anybody can embrace this. 3 words, right? I am worthy. Reminding ourselves that we're worthy is so important because it allows us to remove the guilt factor, right? So it's important because we want to remove the guilt factor. It's important because we are worthy, and it's important because it's going to benefit us and those around us. And I love this in the chat, that feeling of guilty for taking time to work out when you're parenting full-time at home while kids aren't in school. This is perfect. Kids need self-care too, and sometimes that self-care for them includes not having mom or dad or Grammy or somebody, whoever's with you in your home, in their face all the time. They need space too. So reframing how we think about those moments is super important. So in order to create a mindset of worthiness, you can think about 5 things. Reject those garbage thoughts. Pick them up, put them in the trash. Boom, boom. Okay? Get rid of them. Imagine owning your worth. Take a moment to think about what you would look like physically if you were owning your worth in every moment. Or pick a moment. I feel like I'm owning my worth right now. I have lots of information to share with you all on this topic, and I feel confident doing so. I am worthy to take this time with you and for myself to better myself and to share my knowledge with you. I feel worthy. Find an example in your day-to-day where you can exemplify or imagine exemplifying your worth. Make a decision. This is about a decision, folks. All of this whole session is about making the decision to invest in yourself, in your worthiness, in your replenishment, in your mental, physical, emotional, cognitive well-being. Make a decision to make it important. Right here, right now, invest and make that conscious decision to do so. Write down new thoughts. So you remember those garbage thoughts, the ones that say I'm not worthy, the ones that say I'm not an engaged enough mom, I'm not doing enough at work, I'm not fit enough, I'm not smart enough, whatever they were that we just threw in the garbage. We're going to write new thoughts. If I could ask you to do anything that's really fulfilling is to write 2 or 3 new thoughts that you want to tell yourself. I was on a run this morning, and I listened to motivational runs, so it's through an app. And one of the instructor today, she said, that old adage of if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all? That should particularly apply to yourself. Think about the power of that. Think about taking that negative self-talk away and giving yourself new thoughts and new words to say to yourself. And then the 5th thing to creating a mindset of worthiness is to practice. We can't do any of this without practice, okay? So when you pause and you've given yourself that permission, think about these things. What can self-care be? I think we've talked about a little of that. It can be giving yourself space and time to do something replenishing. It can be, as systematic as listening to a meditation on YouTube or Calm or Headspace or any of those wonderful apps that are out there. It can be getting to bed a little earlier. It can be as simple as writing down some gratitude and intention. It can be being mindful and present with the ones you love and having replenishing, good check-in conversations. It can be saying, I'm only going to be able to put in X number of hours doing this amount of stuff today, creating those boundaries. It can be I'm going to have a long hot bath because I need to be in a space where I feel calm. It can be anything little that gives you the replenishment. It can be an action like painting your nails or having a bath, but be mindful in those moments. So remember, it's less about the indulgence and more about the intent. So the indulgence might be that you also get cute toes for summer coming. And the intent is that you have quiet, calm moments, right? So you can partner those things. Let's take a moment to remember what self-care isn't. If I could, I'd have you all say it with me now. Self-care is not optional. It is not indulgent. It is not selfish. Self-care is necessary. So how we've talked through all this today is really about creating different mindset, really knowing what self-care and giving your self permission to do things is. But think about how you're going to create a self-care mindset and how does this align with your values. So moving to the next slide, we're going to talk about the 7 pillars of self-care. And it's really important to know those pillars because I think that's how we start to create a mindset, is thinking about self-care in each of these different areas. So the first pillar of self-care is knowledge and health literacy. So it's really about knowing how you're going to be healthy. It's about enriching your knowledge in an area that's important to you and taking good care of your health, whether it's mental, physical. It's kind of like the overarching one, right? The second pillar is our mental well-being. For me, self-care, always relates back to my mental well-being. And that's personal. That's an I statement because it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, I know that as a person who has anxiety, it's important to practice self-care to keep that at a level that's manageable. So, like I said, that's a personal example, and it'll be different for all of you. But having those moments of mindfulness, of replenishment, really help establish a clear mental positive headspace for me. And I can do that through a number of means to get there, but that's one of the other pillars. Another pillar is risk avoidance, making sure we're not putting ourselves at unnecessary risk for unnecessary reasons. Okay, so right now, that's important. What do we need when we go out? Do we have to engage in that errand today? Can we make sure we know all of the facts before we lead into the next activity that we're going to take on? So if we have to leave our home to go to our place of work, what can I do to avoid higher risk right now? That's taking care of ourselves, and that is crucial right now. Crucial to be engaging in self-care that includes risk avoidance. For those essential workers, if any of you are here on the line and are going into, your jobs daily, your job has a higher level of risk, and so therefore you can't avoid it entirely. But you are taking care of your risk by taking care of your physical health with masks and gloves and all the things that you need to do. So it's managing and balancing what we have to do with what we want to do. Of course, physical activity is important to self-care, just moving your body in a way that feels good for you. I used to run a lot, half marathons. I can't do that anymore, it would seem, or I've lost the ability to get there right now. But I move my body every day in a way that feels good for me and makes me feel good about me. And that gives myself time and space by myself often. It also gives me time and space sometimes with my spouse and my kids, depending on what we're up to. And it makes me feel good mentally, and it's keeping my health in check, and it leads to a lot of different things. So these can all be interwoven. Good hygiene. It's really easy right now to want to spend 3 days in the same pair of pajamas. But taking that time to every once in a while, throw on a little bit of makeup or have a hot shower and put on something that isn't made entirely of just stretchy material. I've made a point to myself to make sure I put on jeans a couple times a week just so I know that they fit. But in all honesty, there's a lot of different ways we can be doing that good hygiene piece. And it's not because we have poor hygiene, but it's paying attention to our good hygiene habits. My husband and I both realized when on the days that he's not working at work, we almost have to like motivate ourselves to remember to do the little things. Like we get up, we're a little slower to get our coffee, we're working kind of at a slower pace maybe than we would if we had to get up and out the door with the kids. And so we have both been reminding ourselves by setting alarms for things that we have to do. I'm going to make sure I have a shower by X time, or don't forget to brush your teeth when you get up in the morning. That's it. Those are things we forget, but our routines have been skewed. So if you need reminders, put them in there to take care of yourself. Healthy eating. A lot more of us are probably eating or possibly eating a lot more at home. And I was talking about my mindless eating sometimes, so just creating healthy eating habits. It's an opportunity to cook more maybe, or to get creative in the kitchen with what we've got to stay healthy. And fueling our bodies with healthy and happy foods is going to make us feel good as well. And then this one is so crucial right now as well, which is rational use of products and services. Aren't these so funny that they completely, I think, correlate with this time of uncertainty in a new way in my mind. So, we need to rationally use what we have when we can get it and where we can get it. And that's been difficult. Sometimes in our culture right now, we've created a sense of fear around whether we can get things, and that has created people to irrationally purchase products or services, potentially, particularly products, and it's been hard to be rational around those. But when we do realize that it's going to be okay, we have enough toilet paper, we have all of these things, then that starts to play back into our self-care as well. We realize that we have what we have, and we have enough. I love that in the chat we're talking about all the yummy snacks we've been indulging into. You guys are making me hungry. But these are the 7 pillars of self-care ideology from, I will share the link to that in the after session as well. All right, so moving forward, some tools to remember for self-care. Let's just make the most out of the self-care. Let's make the most of the time we give ourselves, and let's really give back to ourselves in an efficient and effective way. So I've got a bit of a list here, but feel free to type any of the other tools that you might think are important in the chat, and we'll share those as well if you'd like. But we've talked about boundaries as being an important tool. We may have to include chips after this conversation in the chat as self-care. But boundaries and mindfulness, we've talked about as tools. Authenticity and really being who you are and being true to yourself. Owning your values. Self-love. Being open to opportunities. There are going to be new opportunities or new types of opportunities that come our way in this time. And so I think that we have to take care of ourselves and give ourselves space also by being open to these opportunities. We're going to declutter our mental, emotional, and physical lives. We're going to get some fresh air, socially making sure we're physically distanced from folks, but still enjoying some fresh air and healthy, happy foods. We're going to rest, and we're going to really focus on our sleep hygiene and really taking time for us. We're going to have a sense of humor. I think having a sense of humor in moments is really important for self-care, and that's why the chat is making me giggle right now, because I love this conversation around potato chips. Like, let's be honest, because this is something to talk about that's not heavy, it's light, it's enjoyable, and it's something we can all relate to. So having a sense of humor is a good tool for self-care. Finding time for gratitude, whether it's journaling, just reflecting, whatever that looks like, is important. And really to take the time to invest in personal time. So it can be difficult to want to invest in personal time right now, but that's going to allow you to give back at the end of the day. Does anybody have anything else that they wanted to share about any tools that they feel like they've gotten from today that they can use to incorporate and make the most out of their self-care? You can feel free to throw those in the chat if you'd like. And we're just about back to the top of the hour, and I've done a lot of talking about self-care. And I know we've had some really engaged conversation in the chat, which has been super nice. So keep thinking about those tools that you can use to make the most of your time. Again, let's reiterate the most important thing here. It doesn't have to be 6 hours of spa-like self-care. It can be 2 minutes of mindful meditation. It can be being present in the moment while you wash your dishes. It can be a warm shower, anything that replenishes you. So here are the things that we're going to see happen as we go through self-care. So we talked about self-care as a practice, and I think that that's really important to note. Like I said, you don't go out and run a marathon your first time putting sneakers on. So you're not going to get to be a self-care aficionado overnight, but you can do little things, and little things make a big difference, as somebody mentioned in the chat. It's about the little moments rather than the big grand gestures. And all we're really looking at doing is making progress. One of my favorite quotes or favorite mantras is strive for progress, not perfection. That runs the gamut in so many areas of my life personally. I think about it when I come to being fit and healthy. You know, I think about it when I come to being a parent. I'm just want to be my best me every day as a parent, but I'm not going to be perfect. Nobody is. I think about that when I think about self-care, when I think about my work, when I think about everything. Progress, not perfection. You know, it's important to really strive for that excellence. We're not going to get to perfect. Perfect is elusive, and it's not really a real thing. We all have a different image of what perfection is, so how could we even really get there? But we can get to excellence, and we can strive to do our best. It's also about consistency, and this is the one that can be challenging for folks. Consistency is difficult. When you think about it, somebody might say to you in their physical well-being, I want to lose 20 pounds for that wedding I have coming up in 10 months. Okay, that's great. So they stay consistent and they focus on that for that 10 months, and then what happens? Consistency might have gotten them there, but lifestyle is what's going to take it further. And I think that those all lead into one another. Consistency is so difficult right now, guys. I am with you. Our lives are inconsistent to what you're used to. Future, opportunities and things are unknown. But all we have is today, right? We have today. Today is where we're at. So let's strive for that progress. Let's try to build on what we maybe did yesterday. And let's aim to see if we can get there again tomorrow. And little by little, inch by inch, day by day, some of these things will become lifestyle moments. Not all of them will work for you. Don't work super hard on making progress in meditation if you hate every second of it and it's not helpful in your life. Do not work on that. Let that go if you've given it, a good try. I know somebody in chat here is talking about, they're on over 100 days of exercise and how impactful that's been. But progress and lifestyle are now better because of the consistency. So in this time of uncertainty, while we can't say plan for 10 months out, you can plan for tomorrow, right? We can plan for the next hour. We can be consistent today for the day. And I think that that's where we need to be. And if we do that each and every day, we're going to get to that lifestyle moment and those things that are important. I love this. The unknown brings opportunities for challenges and successes. And I think that's so true. I think that if we halt ourselves because of the unknown, we are doing ourselves a disservice. But if we strive to do just little bits at a time to make that little bit of progress and challenge ourselves, we will find success in those moments. And just, embrace what you can. And the other thing about self-care, guys, 100%, and it is so important right now, is to allow yourself some grace. This is a different time. We are in a different headspace globally, locally, familially, and individually. It is so important to find grace with yourself, but give yourself some expectation. So, don't blow it out of the water and say, I'm going to lose 20 pounds by tomorrow. if that's a goal that you have, or I'm going to do 7 hours of mindful meditation every day, good on you for getting it done. But is that going to be sustainable? Can you be consistent? And the thing about self-care, like so many things, is that it's a practice, and it's a practice of self-love, and it takes time to feel good and right and clear in your system of your life. So just think about that as we move forward from today with our ideologies around self-care. You know, this is just the beginning. If you are already into some self-care routines, this is the beginning of something new, or the beginning of the next chapter of self-care for you. This might be the very beginning of your self-care practice, but it is the beginning of life after this conversation. So what are you going to learn from that? What are you going to take from today? What are you going to take from this hour? And start here. So here are some quotes that I think are really good food for thought. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. It's so important to find time to replenish, so you get to give your best you to yourself first and to everybody else, not just what's left over. I really like that one when I put it in perspective of my kids. You know, I want my kids to have the best version of me. They're going to see all versions of me, no doubt, and they have. But I want to try to aim for and strive for giving them the most I can every day. And giving myself the most is part of that. Self-care is also how you take your power back. I think that's rooted in that ideology of setting boundaries and owning your own values and knowing and owning your worth. Take back the power that is yours. You are the CEO of your life, right? I was going to read this earlier and I forgot about it, but I'll throw it in here now. If you think about yourself as the CEO of your life, and this is something else I get from my motivational workout stuff, one of the instructors said it, if you're the CEO of your life, think about what a CEO does. They walk into a room in a power suit where they've made a meeting for themselves, you know, and they're not missing that meeting, because if they miss that meeting, they're not successful. And so if you miss out on those opportunities to be the CEO of your life, and you just throw, oh, I don't really need to take that walk, I don't really need to have, you know, a little extra sleep, it's not important, you're missing out, you're losing your power. Owning those things, setting appointments in your life that you refuse to miss, and some of those appointments should be self-care, and probably all will come back to being self-care related if you really think about it. That's when you get your power back, that's when you see success, and that's how you lead your life full and fulfilled, in my personal opinion and personal experience. And don't feel guilty about what's doing best for you. My Lord, I should have that on every surface of everything in my house. Guilt is something that I struggle with, folks, and I know I've heard it here, and I'm going to wrap up after this. But don't feel guilty about what's doing what's best for you, because what's best for you is going to be best also in the interest of those around you. And so it's not about the others, it is about you. But you can't give to anybody else if you don't start with yourself. So those are three of my favorite self-care quotes that I think it's important, because I look at this, even though it's the end of our conversation, right now this is the beginning of a self-care journey that starts here and now today. If you are interested in getting a hold of me or want to talk more about self-care or any of the tools that I've used to come up with today's workshop, here are some ways that you can get a hold of me. I'm a blogger, so you can find some of my blogs on life, being a woman, a mom, a fitness enthusiast, not a guru, but an enthusiast, and just living in general. You can find me at momdaymotivation.com, or my email is there. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Love hearing from everybody, and I can certainly give you more information if you would like to have it at the end of all this. Reach out. Other than that, if you have any questions or wanted to pop on to share any comments with us, now is the time to do so. And I just wanted to say that part of my gratitude today and my practice of self-care often involves my practice of gratitude will be the opportunity to speak and share this with you all today, because I think it's so important to share in moments like this, and to share the struggles and the successes that we have in this journey of taking care of ourselves. So thank you so very much for joining me today.